here. And now we are recording. Again, we just ask that all attendees please keep themselves muted for the duration of this presentation so we don't experience any feedback. We will open the floor for questions and answers at the end, and at that time we will notify everyone that you can unmute yourself at that time. There is a chat feature on Ring Central, which we will be monitoring for the duration of the presentation. And again, we'll be taking those question and answers at the end. We thank you for joining us today. Again, this is the third part of our part 3 of 3 of our webinar series with the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission. Back in July 28th, CEDACOG presented alongside the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency to bring the presentation called Flood Mitigation Grant Assistance. Our second presentation was held in November 10th, I believe, where Terry Provost and myself presented flood mitigation types and techniques. We thank you if you attended one or both of these events. If you were unable to attend those presentations, you can refer back to SPC's website under the Water Resource Center, past workshop materials under the flooding section to view any of the recording or presentations. This webinar is brought to you by the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, the Water Resource Center, in partnership with CEDA Council of Governments, or CEDACOG. CEDACOG would like to extend a special thank you to Erin Keppel-Adams of SPC's Water Resource Center. Without her collaboration and organization of this event, we would not be here today. So again, thank you, Erin, for your coordination. Something that Erin has asked us to mention is if you or your organization have any ideas for future workshop topics, please contact Erin Keppel-Adams at ekeppel@spcregion.org, which is, her email is also included at the bottom left-hand portion of this slide on the screen. Speaking of slides, the slides will be made available to all the folks on a registration list after today's presentation. And again, the information will be posted on SPC's website as well. Moving on to our introduction of our speakers. Today we have presenting a majority of the material is Elizabeth Lockwood, or Betsy Lockwood, as we like to call her here at CEDACOG. She is the Director of Project Development and Grants and our PrEP Regional Coordinator in the Economic Development Department. Betsy has been a member of the CEDACOG staff since May of 1977. Is that correct, or is that 1997, Betsy? I apologize.
That should be 1997. Otherwise, I would have been 5 years old.
1997. I apologize for that typo. Her duties have focused in the area of project development and project management. In her position as the Director of Project Development and Grants for the Economic Development Program, she prepares and submits grant applications for the Economic Development Administration, EDA, Appalachian Regional Commission, ARC, and other federal and state agencies. In her role as the PrEP Regional Coordinator, Betsy carries out various responsibilities, including contract and budget management, reporting, service delivery of this important statewide program. Betsy also serves as the Pennsylvania State Data Center affiliate, where she disseminates information to the public received from the U.S. Census Bureau and the Pennsylvania State Data Center and other sources. She is a 1999 graduate of the Leadership Susquehanna Valley, and in 2003 completed the Economic Development course sponsored by the International Development Council and Pennsylvania State Harrisburg. Ooh, I apologize there. Additionally, Betsy has obtained her professional economic development certification from the Pennsylvania Economic Development Association program. Now moving on to Franklin Hackenbrock, or Frankie as we affectionately call him here at CEDACOG. He is a program analyst in the Economic Development Department. Frankie has over 5 years of experience in project management, organization, and administration support. He was the program manager of the Downspout Disconnection Program at the Rockwood Creek Conservancy in Bethesda, Maryland in 2017. And from 2015 to 2017, he was the Director of Programs and Development at the Policy Studies Organization in Washington, D.C., among other numerous positions. He's earned his master's degree in public administration from American University in D.C. in 2016, and his bachelor's degree in environmental studies from Juniata College with a minor in anthropology in 2010. He's also earned his international teaching English as foreign language training certificate in 2012. The focus of today's webinar, we would like to expand from our the other two parts of our series. So our previous topics that we had mentioned, our last webinar, we had discussed more on the non-structural side of things. So I have on there the structural versus non-structural. Our structural is like your levees, dams, dikes, bridges, flood control structures. Our non-structural mitigation topics are items that you can do more on a personal level to reduce flood damage or flood risk to property by making alterations and purchasing flood insurance. So previously, we've been having more of a focus on the residential side of things, whereas today, our floodplain management for non-residential structures. So it's stepping away from our residential side and moving to the non-residential structures. And our funding sources that Betsy will be speaking of very soon here, she's going to explore the various aspects of EDA, our Economic Development Administration funding sources, and ARC, the Appalachian Regional Commission. And with that, Betsy, I'm going to stop sharing and send it over to you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jerilee. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, and thanks, Jerilee, for introducing me. I did not start working at CEDACOG in 1977. If so, I would have been 5 years old. So I don't want anyone to think I'm older than I actually am. But the purpose of today's program is to talk about the floodplain management for non-residential structures. And I'm going to give a few examples of projects that we've done in the region or that we'll be undertaking soon. I'll be primarily discussing funds with the Department of Commerce, the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration, and we'll also touch on how we've used other funding, including the Appalachian Regional Commission. ARC and EDA are considered economic development funds through the federal government. This means that they fund projects that have economic impacts, such as businesses created, businesses retained, jobs created and retained, sales increases, etc. So those are the types of impacts that come out of projects that are funded through ARC and EDA. The EDA is responsible for allocating, $3 billion in ARPA funds around the nation. And in a moment, I will discuss what ARPA means. ARPA stands for American Rescue Plan. The chart that I currently have up shows how the funding was broken out among the different programs with EDA. You'll see statewide planning, research networks, Build Back Better, travel and tourism, economic adjustment assistance, indigenous communities, and Good Jobs Challenge. Today, I'm going to be primarily talking about the economic adjustment assistance, where they've allocated $500 million nationally for this program. So it's highlighted red on this chart. All right, let's bring up the next slide here. All right, if you go to eda.gov, you'll come up with the EDA website, and you can click on funding opportunities, and then click on the American Rescue Act, the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. It will take you to the breakout of each of the programs under the EDA ARPA funds. You can see I have this circled here. You can either click on the fiscal year 2021 American Rescue Plan Act, or you can go down and click on one of the programs under the ARPA funds below: Economic Adjustment Assistance, Travel and Tourism, Indigenous Communities, Build Back Better, Statewide Planning, and the Good Jobs Challenge. And all of those will take you to the summary of each program. It'll take you to a link for the NOFA, the Notice of Funding opportunity. And it'll also have a webinar and slides that were shown, I think about a month or two ago. So you'll be able to review all of that to get in more detail about those funding programs. ARPA is stimulus funding that was passed under the current administration to help with the economic recovery caused by the pandemic. These ARPA funds will help build back more resilient and local economies that can withstand an economic shock such as the pandemic. The Economic Adjustment Assistance Program is what we're going to focus on today. And as I said before, it has about $500 million to allocate. Those applications are due around March 15th, 2022. And there's a reason that they're due March 15th. They work backwards from when they needed to have the funds allocated. In terms of eligibility, I want to start off by saying that, I guess I should advance the slide here, that EDA does not provide funding directly to for-profit entities or individuals, okay? So there are a specific set of entities that are eligible for EDA funding, and those include district organizations, the economic development districts, EDD, of which CEDACOG is one, and the SPC is also an economic development district or EDD. Indian tribes are also eligible. You can also have state and local governments or political subdivisions. This can include municipalities, counties, regional water and sewer districts, authorities, airport commissions, and economic development commissions. Then you also have institutions of higher education. So Penn State, University of Pittsburgh, they would be eligible entities as well. Finally, any kind of public or nonprofit organization that's working with a political subdivision is also eligible to be the applicant for EDA funds. EDA has allocated $200 million solely for the use in coal communities. This means if you can provide a nexus to the decline in the coal industry, there's a special pot of funding under economic adjustment assistance that you can utilize that's specifically for coal communities. Economic adjustment assistance is very flexible. There are a number of projects that you can apply it to. Let me see if I can pull up some here. They can include technical assistance funding. So technical assistance could include funding that's provided primarily for personnel assistance. You could also use it for infrastructure development, planning, if there's some planning that you wanted to highlight in your project, and revolving loan funds. So there is a way to help private businesses directly with EDA funds, and that would be by creating a revolving loan fund program. Now, I should add that economic adjustment assistance is a very competitive program. Projects that are regional in nature, meaning it will benefit multiple areas or counties, or even cross over to adjoining states, are considered more competitive under this program. The projects also need to demonstrate growth and resilience for the local economy and create strong partnerships. And additionally, these projects also need to address the comprehensive economic development strategy in your region. And if you're not familiar with the comprehensive economic development strategy, it's also referred to as a CEDS. And the SPC and CEDACOG each have the CEDS for their regions. And it's likely posted on the website. If not, you can check with Jen Lasser at SPC. And CEDACOG also has a CEDS, and you can check with me or Frankie Hackenbrock. The application timeline for economic adjustment assistance grants are accepted on a rolling basis. However, all funds must be obligated by EDA by the end of September 2022. And as such, it was suggested in the NOFO to have all applications submitted no later than March 15th of 2022. The May 31st of 2027 is when the period of performance must end, and you must give yourself some time to allow for closeout of your project. Applicants will want to become familiar with EDA's investment priorities. In a moment, I will go over each of them. The projects will need to address one or more of EDA's priorities, and you will need to demonstrate that in the application. Also, I mentioned that you must demonstrate being able to meet the one or more of the SEDS goals in the regional SEDS. For construction projects, applicants will need to follow the environmental and historic preservation requirements, and the details of that are in the application. You'll also want to work with the local economic development district, or EDD. As I mentioned before, SPC is one for the Southwest region, and CEDACOG serves as an EDD for CEDACOG region. And then we'll work with the EDA local representative, who is Chris Casper. The match for this program in particular is 80%. However, you'll want to note that applications that can provide more match are more competitive at EDA. EDA does have the ability to go up to 100% EDA funding. This means that there is no required match for the grant. However, the applicant will need to describe why there isn't an ability to provide match for the project. What you see on your screen are the EDA investment priorities. Projects will need to meet one or more of the investment priorities, and obviously the more of them they meet, the more competitive they'll be for funding. They include equity, meaning the project should provide assistance to minority populations in the region. This could include women, Black, Latino, Indigenous and Native Americans, Asian Americans. You're going to want to show how your project serves minority populations. You'll also, for the ARPA funds, you'll also want to touch on recovery and resilience. I think every project submitted under ARPA should have a recovery and resilience investment priority that it addresses. And essentially, how does this project provide economic resilience and accelerate the recovery from the pandemic? And as I said, this should be part of all of the ARPA EDA economic adjustment assistance projects. Workforce development. Does this project support workforce training and education that would provide jobs with family sustaining wages? Manufacturing. Does this project encourage job creation, business expansion, increased productivity? Tech-based economic development. Does this project aid in creating technology-based businesses and high-skilled and high-paying jobs? Environmentally sustainable. Does your project help address the climate crisis? And exports and foreign direct investment. Does this project help increase exports and increase foreign direct investment in the region? If so, describe how that happens through this project. EDA, ARPA, economic adjustment assistance projects generally range from about $500,000 to $5 million. I'd say about $2 million, $2.5 million is a sweet spot with EDA funds. That's what we've been learning as we've been talking with Chris Casper at EDA. You will also need to be sure to follow the required federal regulations, including competitive procurement and Davis-Bacon wage rates where applicable. You'll also need to demonstrate how your project will provide assistance to the underserved communities. All applications for EDA economic adjustment funds can be found on grants.gov. And in order to apply for funds, you must have a DUNS number and a System Award Management, or SAM, registration. And once you have that information, you're able to go on to grants.gov and create a profile, and then go to the Notice of Funding Opportunity and click on that link, and it'll take you to the application. As I said before, there's about, what did I say? Let me see here, hold on. There's funds set aside to provide for coal communities. So through economic adjustment assistance, there's a total of $200 million set aside for those that not only have issues with the pandemic, but you can also demonstrate an impact by being eligible for the coal communities commitment. The definition of coal communities is having job losses or layoffs that can be caused by coal mining. Perhaps there was a shutdown or a layoff caused by the closing of a coal-fired power plant, or losses within the supply chain. That could be truck drivers. It could be someone along the rail. It could be any number of ancillary services that are provided to folks in the coal industry. There is no defined list of coal impacted communities that EDA has. However, in your narrative, you need to provide data, third-party data, whether it's from US Census Bureau, Bureau of Labor and Statistics, or another source. ARC is another really good resource for identifying areas where there's been coal impacts. And you need to demonstrate that you have been impacted by the reduction of coal in your application in order to be eligible for the coal community funds. Okay. For economic adjustment assistance through EDA, as I said, they've allocated, I believe, $500 million, and $200 million of that is reserved for coal communities. This, again, can be used for technical assistance, public works, infrastructure planning, et cetera. Just as the regular economic adjustment assistance was also eligible, so is everything through the coal communities. However, you must demonstrate a nexus to coal in order to qualify. It shows here that EDA had allocated a total of $300 million for coal communities. One was under the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. That deadline is passed for Build Back Better. So what we have to work with right now is economic adjustment assistance, where they've allocated $200 million. All right, so an example of where we funded a flood resiliency non-residential structure is for the Bloomsburg flood wall. And here, let me pull this up for you. In 2012, we don't have anything recent. However, back in 2012, the EDA granted the town of Bloomsburg $15 million to construct a $30 million flood wall to protect two industries that together employed approximately 900 manufacturing jobs. The $15 million was matched by $12 million in state funds, and then an additional $3 million that was provided from the local industries. The EDA grant was part of a $200 million appropriation made by Congress to EDA for disaster assistance from massive flooding from Tropical Storm Lee in 2011. Oftentimes, after a major flood event or major weather event, you will see that there are FEMA disaster declarations that are held. And in this instance, this was the Tropical Storm Lee, and you can see the Columbia County is shaded in red. So all of these counties were eligible for the funding listed under EDA for disaster declaration. This was the dedication on October 11th, 2016. So you'll recall, I believe that we applied for funds in 2012, and 4 years later, it was able to get built and dedicated. And this shows a number of EDA Philadelphia and national office representatives. And this also shows the picture of the flood wall that was dedicated. Okay, here's another project. This is another flood resiliency project that CEDACOG participated in. It was called the Bloomsburg to Lime Ridge Corridor Stormwater Study. This project measured stormwater runoff for potential implementation projects that would mitigate future flooding events along this corridor. This project was completed in Columbia County. It's an area that has undergone much development and created a lot of stormwater runoff. It's an area that's been consistently overwhelmed by floodwaters coming from the river, creeks, and stormwater flooding. As you can see, this was a stormwater study. It was estimated to cost about $105,000. We received $25,000 from the Appalachian Regional Commission under their area development funds. Local, the town of Bloomsburg, Scott Township, and CEDACOG committed collectively $37,500. The CEDACOG Joint Rail Authority committed $5,000. The state also had some funds. They committed $25,000. And the industries also committed collectively $12,500. This included the industries that were going to be impacted by this: Sekisui, 84 Lumber, the JM Smucker Company. They had all had committed some funding towards this stormwater study project. This is the map of the project that we created for the application. And you can see it goes from, let me just see here, from west to east, it's the town of Bloomsburg, and then Scott Township, and then at the eastern end is South Center Township. The CEDACOG Joint Rail Authority served as the applicant for the funds because, as you can see in this picture, they own rail siding all along the corridor. And the regional Joint Rail Authority organization made sense to serve as the applicant for these funds in this instance. Otherwise, there would have been probably a lot of either co-applicants or one main applicant and several other municipalities served as co-applicants. Okay. Through a competitive bidding process, McTish, Kunkel and Associates was hired to perform the stormwater study. There were 3 municipalities involved along the corridor, again, town of Bloomsburg, Scott Township, and South Center Township in Columbia County. The project started prior to the pandemic, so there were a couple of in-person meetings with stakeholders explaining the issues. These stakeholders included actual residential properties that were getting flooded on a regular basis, or they may be, while they may not have been flooded, local roads may have been flooded and they weren't able to leave their homes. There were manufacturers, there were municipal officials and county officials that were attending the meetings. I'd say on average, there were at least 25 to 35 people at each of the public meetings that we had held prior to the pandemic taking place. This was great. This allowed the consultants to focus in on specific areas that were noted as being problematic. Once the pandemic hit, we were limited to virtual meetings, which worked out well at the time because by then the study was underway. By that point, we were able to refer back to the study, to review previous versions and ask questions of the consultants. The project ended in December of 2020 and concluded with the consultants prioritizing implementation projects in each of the municipalities. And as you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, we have the town of Bloomsburg, and they have about 5 projects ranked from high to low. Scott Township has a number of projects ranked from high, medium to low. And then South Center Township also has several projects ranked from high to medium to low. In addition to the priority list, there were also examples of the project summaries. So here's an example of an implementation project identified in the study to mitigate flooding in the area. It's called the Low Street Stormwater Basin. And as you can see, the project summary shows the cost estimate for the project, the location, whether or not this project sits on public or private property. That's always important to know before going into a project. If it's on private property, there would have to be some sort of easement, or the land would need to be sold, or the project to be constructed would need to be somehow owned and operated by the either the applicant or a public entity. It also explains the priority for the municipality, provides an overview of the impact of the project, and finally highlights some key issues for the project that need to be considered when undertaking it. To date, there are several projects being considered for implementation. They range from widening of stormwater culverts to construction of berms to protect floodwater from certain areas, and then making major stormwater improvements. For some cases, that's expanding the pipes that are being used in the stormwater so that it's not being pinched at a certain area. So those are the two projects that I've highlighted for floodplain management and non-residential structures. And I will turn things back over to Jerry.
Thank you, Betsy. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I did not receive any questions in the chat box. I don't know if anybody would like to add their questions at this time. That way we can try to respond to those, or at this time, you may unmute yourself and ask any questions that you may have. It looked like one person had unmuted themselves. Please let me know if you're having any difficulties speaking. Or you can throw your question in the chat box as well. Well, while we have the floor open here, thank you, Betsy, for adding our contact information here. Again, in our previous 3 parts now of our webinar series, previously Terry Provost and myself had presented on parts 1 and 2. Terry Provost is our Director of Housing and Flood Resiliency. Her contact information is on the screen there. I am Jerry Ziegler, the Flood Resiliency Program Analyst, with my email as well. Betsy's contact information is on the top right, as well as Frankie Hackenbrock's. You can feel free to reach out to us with any questions, and we will do our best to answer you, whether that be from today's presentation materials, past materials, or any other things in the future. I don't hear any, I haven't received anything in the chat box, and we're not hearing any questions, Betsy. So with that, I guess we can end our session today. I thank everyone very much for their time and joining us for our webinar series. And thank you very much, Betsy, for presenting on this material. It was very beneficial.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon and happy holidays.